So hello everybody, welcome to Payara evaluation webinar, which is our turn to answer your questions. Your turn was before to ask the questions, and we analyzed all the questions we got and picked those that would fit into the 45 minutes we have now. And let's go to the questions. We already have some answers for you. So one question is the quite a basic one. How does Payara Server differ from other servers? So for those who don't know what Payara Server is, or even if it is, if they know, they don't know how it compares to their favorite server. Okay. Sorry. Payara Server, first and foremost, is an open source application server. It can run Java EE applications and also microprofile applications. And it's also supported. So the same open source version that you can download for free and use for free, you can also get support for it and use additional services and additional resources. And also when you get a problem, you can raise a ticket for Payara support and get immediately support from them. It also supports flexible clustering with Hazelcast and offers caching mechanisms via JGate API. And it also has a distribution called Payara Micro, which uses or offers roughly the same features, except some APIs which it doesn't support. And with Payara Micro, you can start applications from command line or even bundle them in an executable jar. So this is quite a lot of features which not so many other application servers support out of the box. Compared to JBoss, which I know that supports, I think, all of these features. Payara offers them in every release and synchronized way, releasing Payara Server and Payara Micro at the same time and adding the same features to both. Where JBoss may have different features in the enterprise licensed version, and in Wildfly and in Thorntail, and you can see that these products are even have different names, and they also have different releases. So it's a quite different user experience when you look at the documentation. But it doesn't mean that they are worse. It's just Payara tries to keep the unified experience across the products. And compared to other web application servers like WebLogic or WebSphere, Payara Server is open source and free to use, unlike these, which you can download an evaluation version, but in production you have to pay for a license. And if we compare to Tomcat, which is by far one of the most, or probably the most popular server, Payara Server contains a lot more features than bare Tomcat, even more APIs, because Tomcat is just a servlet container. It just offers a small subset of Java EE APIs out of the box, while Payara Server offers Java EE and microprofile, as I said before, and a lot of other services built in. So on the next question, what caching features are provided by Payara Server? So, Andy, do you have any answer for this?
So Gcache is probably the headline one in there, which is, off the top of my head, GSR 109, I think it is. That's brought in by Hazelcast, which does a number of things, including clustering, and that goes across the entire data grid. So you can cache things.
Yeah, and plus on top of this, Hazelcast powers JCache mechanism, It can be also used directly by injecting Hazelcast into your application. And we also added in a couple of months ago support for JPA second level cache using Hazelcast. So you can leverage the same technology underneath. Do we have any other caching features besides others? Like I think these are the most prominent caching features in Payara Server.
Yeah, Jcache is the main one. EasyCache does also provide JPA first and second level caching.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, and interesting question. Why use Payara Server instead of Spring and Springboot? So I'm not a heavy Spring user, but I can say that Spring can be used with Payara Server, so you don't always have to choose between Payara Server or Springboot. That's one thing. But Payara Server itself has enough functionality in there to power your applications to offer you a smooth development experience with just the standard APIs of Java EE and Microprofile. So if you use these APIs, you can build a lot without adding additional dependencies into your application, without really building everything into your application. And if you choose Spring Boot, you can still run it on Payara Server. You just have to package it as a WAR application with all the Spring dependencies inside. But Payara Server really has good support for Spring Boot, and if there were issues in the past, most of them are already resolved. So it's only a matter of configuration in some border cases. But in general, you can use everything you can use in Spring and run it on Payara Server. So you can choose both. If you choose to use built-in Payara Server APIs, there's obviously a lot better integration into built-in Payara services, like monitoring and health check service, and also some other like tracing services, where Payara Server can intercept method calls and events, and it now understands the Java EE API is much better than Spring APIs, but it's up to you. Payara Server works better with the standard APIs and provides a lot of functionality out of the box, whilst with Spring you have to assemble all the pieces together and think about which versions to use and which pieces work with which other pieces. And if you miss them in your application, you have to build them again into your application, while with Payara Server, you have them in the runtime. And the last advantage of this is if the runtime updates into a new version, you can just reinstall the application server, Payara Server. You don't have to rebuild your application. Another question is how Payara Server is licensed and what is the cost of commercial support? Yeah, I mentioned before that Payara Server is open source, so that's the basic feature. And it's not only open source, but it's also supported as open source. So even for the supported version, you don't have to have a license. So you can use just the same version that the Payara customers use, except Payara customers get other releases outside of the normal release lifecycle. So they have more frequent releases and get the fixes sooner. But there's no real difference in functionality and in stability. Our customers don't get different releases. They also use the public releases besides the patches. And the cost is obviously then, if you want us to run it without getting additional support from us, from the developers of Payara Server. You can run it for free. You can even raise questions and raise issues on our community pages. But if you decide to go with commercial support, you will get a lot more. You will get dedicated support from the development team and highly experienced support team. And you get a lot more documentation that is only available to customers on top of the documentation which we also give out for free on public pages. And I think the cost can start at around $8,000 or $9,000 per year for the smallest installation for production, and it grows depending on how many installations you have or how many cores CPU cores you use with Payara Server, either physical or virtual cores. You can choose what fits best for you, and the cheapest option is available to you. So you can choose what is the cheapest for you. And I think the highest enterprise is around $150,000, but it covers unlimited number of installations. So it's only for when you really need to have a pool of Payara servers and get support for that. You can also get maintenance and project support for Payara Server if you don't yet run your applications in production. So this is specifically tailored to help you build the application or migrate your applications to Payara Server before you go to production, and then you can get commercial support for production when you actually go into production. How is Payara Server integrated with usual development tools?
I believe I can take that one. So we do provide various integrations. We like to call it the Payara ecosystem, and we do provide them and support for them. Obviously, with priority to people who paying customers. But we have integrations for Maven, NetBeans and Eclipse. We also have some Achillean connectors for those of you who want to write some unit tests, integration tests rather than unit tests, using Payara Server. All of these are open source, so you can fork them or contribute to them as you wish. And we are now continuing to develop these. We haven't just made them and run them. We are continuing to develop them and support them. And for those of you who picked up that I only said NetBeans and Eclipse, we do have plans to do IntelliJ at some point.
Yeah.
I don't know what point that is, but at some point.
So basically, we have support for some IDEs for two of the three major ones. What about those IDEs like IntelliJ or Visual Studio Code, which we still don't support? Is there any other support and any other way to leverage something we can provide to users? Like if they use Maven to
yes, and the existing plugins for Glassfish as well. I know there's one for IntelliJ. Those should also work with Payara Server still. So.
Yeah, so if the IDE supports Glassfish, it should work well with Payara.
Yeah, if it supports, as long as the IDE supports Glassfish 4 or 5, that will work with Payara 4 and 5 respectively.
Yeah, so we're in this sense we're compatible with Glassfish connector.
Yes, our own connectors just adds extra things on top of that.
Right, good.
A bit closer integration.
So it feels more natural, but it still can be used with
Yes, exactly.
Another thing, we also have Maven plugins, or we document Maven how to use Maven plugins to deploy to Payara Server, and we have specific Maven plugin for running with Payara Micro.
Yeah,
So
from which you can do many things. We like to harp on quite frequently about the pre and post boot commands. You can pass those in via the Maven
and actually,
for
I think what's interesting is our NetBeans plugin for Payara Micro. So not for the Payara Server, but the Payara Micro one basically uses Maven underneath, and you can configure it from the POM XML file. And
Yes, you
then,
can. It does. It uses the Maven archetype to generate everything for you.
yeah. So then you can just
Start,
the
stop,
same. You can start it also from Maven, from command line, and from NetBeans IDE in the same way.
Yeah.
Okay. Where can I find learning resources for Payara Server?
All over the place is the short answer. So obviously there is documentation which is hosted upon Gitbooks on at docs.payara.fish. If you just search in
Maybe
Google
we
or
can.
Bing or your favorite one for Payara documentation, you should find it. Should be the top result. In fact, Andre is now going to show you.
I'll first show our page at payara.fish.
Yes. So obviously this is the main website and there is links to the documentation here.
That's the best place to start looking for things. And then there's visit documentation, where's the link to the documentation that Andy was mentioning. There's documentation for different versions of Payara Server 2.
Yep, so we try to keep it up to date, and then obviously if you are running a slightly older version, since we release every quarter, every 3 months, obviously things can change in every 3 months, so we try to keep a versioned documentation as well to help with that.
There's also documentation for Payara Server and Payara Micro, kept separated, but on the same web page. And also documentation for microprofile and our specific features, which are implemented by both Payara Micro and Payara Server. So it's really,
yes, they have parity for micro.
most of the features are available in both. And
yeah, of course, there's also the blog, a lot of articles written by the community, a lot of videos as well.
Yep, blog.
There's the blog. And then I also wanted to point out we have Getting Started series with Payara, where you can find, especially for those who are just getting started with Payara, there's a series of articles how to use it with the IDE, how to set up a connection to database and things like that. Here's the blog post. Yeah.
There's also a forum, and there's also a forum and our GitHub, which is where we host most of our things. We use GitHub issues there as well and respond to things reasonably promptly. So they are both, and so obviously GitHub issues, they don't just disappear after they've been closed. You can search for past issues that have been resolved or answered. Same on the forum, you can search for all the past resolved issues.
And also a good way to keep in touch with what's up, what's new in Payara Server, and get some mails is to subscribe to our mailing list, or non-mailing list, to receive emails about information about Payara Server.
Like and subscribe, yes.
Yeah, and obviously the knowledge base as well for those that just become customers.
Yeah, for customers we have extra knowledge base. It's not anything secret. It's just to give something more to our customers and more tailored to specifically for their needs.
Yeah, just something like user guides and the like, which are just kind of very more.
Yeah, we also plan to to publish there some video tutorials and some lectures. Okay, another question. How robust is security and administration in Payara Server?
So the security bit is obviously a bit of a broad question, as is the administration aspect. But on the administration front, there's numerous ways to administer the server. There's a fully functioning CLI. You'll very frequently see it mentioned being called as admin, which is the name of it, from which you can do pretty much everything. Actually, no, you can do everything. The server is fully administrable, that's the word, from the CLI. On top of that CLI can also run scripts, so you don't have to literally write it out line by line. You can, if you've got a script, you can pass that to the CLI, and that will set up the server line by line to how you described it. Building again upon that script in the actual admin console, which I guess I should have mentioned first. There's an admin console. If you rather administrate it using a more visual medium, that admin console does provide as admin recording, we call it, which essentially means that from within this admin console, when you're running it, you can just turn on the recorder, set up the server how you like. I have an assistant to demonstrate. You can turn on the recorder, set up the server as you like, and then when you're finished, you turn it off, and in the actual domain directory where you've installed Payara, there will be a script essentially telling you what you've done, so that if you want to set up the server again, you can just run that command rather than having to do it step by step again.
And I think in terms of security, we have security features on different levels. We support several security protocols like SSL, TLS, and up to 1.2, and I think 1.3 can be installed and supported. And we also provide SSL support or in communication between Payara service instances, so it's possible to secure communication in the cluster.
And on top of that, obviously, we also, as a on top of that, we also support the Payara Server can run Java EE applications. So the security aspects within the Java EE spec, such as JASPIC, the applications themselves.
So it's possible to configure different roles for different permissions for users, right? And also it's the same thing is possible within administration to restrict some access to some administration aspects of specific people.
Yeah, the user in groups in that aspect, that extends to the admin console, so you can set it up so only certain users A can log in, and B, only certain users can do certain things. Following that thread, there is auditing in there as well. You can set up auditing so you can see who's done what, and various other bits of information. And then I guess it's slightly related to administration. There are monitoring resources available as well. We have both REST monitoring and a visual representation of the monitoring within the admin console.
Yeah. Now I remember that in the last release we added also a feature of securing access to these monitoring data, especially the micro profile metrics, where you can just allow it to a specific set of users. And when you enable it on the virtual server and give access to different set of users for the virtual server. Does Payara Server conform to the latest J2E or Java EE standards? First, I would explain what is the difference between J2E and Java EE, maybe Jakarta EE.
J2EE is, for those of you who already who know your history, that's the original name for Java EE, J2, I believe literally standing for Java 2 Enterprise Edition. This later just got renamed to be Java EE. I've got to be very careful with my language there. Payara Server can run Java EE8 applications, which that is the latest Java EE specification. Payara 4 runs Java EE7 applications, and for any of you who have been have your head in this buckets, you'll probably have heard that Oracle have been transferring Java EE over to Eclipse, and has since been renamed Jakarta, or Jakarta EE is the Eclipse version of Java EE, essentially.
And it doesn't mean that it's for the Eclipse IDE, it's the Eclipse Foundation.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
sorry, yes.
Eclipse IDE just is an IDE also for Java EE and Jakarta EE developers, but for any other developers, it's being developed within the Eclipse Foundation. And Jakarta EE is another project, like in parallel to Eclipse IDE, which continues Java EE development, right? And what are our plans, like where Payara stands with Jakarta EE?
So the Payara team itself is actually quite involved in Jakarta EE. A number of us are either committers or lead on a couple of the projects.
We have most leads.
We have the most leads.
I think so.
So we're obviously quite heavily involved in that. We're on the actual Jakarta EE government board, I think is the term. Actually supporting it, Jakarta EE has only just started actually releasing its individual specifications, and as of a couple of days ago, actually released Eclipse Glassfish. So for those of you who don't know, Glassfish was originally the reference implementation of Java EE. With the transfer over into the Eclipse Foundation, they have now since released Eclipse Glassfish, which is done against, essentially, it is still just Glassfish, but done against Eclipse, like relicensed and everything. The Eclipse Foundation plan is to then essentially make a Jakarta EE version rather than a Java EE version, and then re-release Glassfish against the Jakarta EE specs rather than Java EE specs. Obviously, when that happens, or even before that happens, depending on time frames, Payara will become Jakarta EE compliant. We have full plans to keep pushing ahead with Jakarta EE.
Okay. What about other features? Does Payara Server support high availability scenarios? Is it flexible? So in this regard, yes, definitely is the shortest answer we could get. But in more detail, Payara Server builds on the Glassfish heritage, which already had a good support for high availability scenarios, although it didn't function well in all the scenarios, which is now fixed in Payara Server, and Payara 5, it's completely redesigned because the clustering runs on Hazelcast data grid, and it's completely flexible, so it doesn't require configuring the cluster upfront. It's just enough to start additional instances and they will discover the cluster and connect to it, so you can easily make the cluster bigger or smaller. And just as an additional concept on top of this, there are deployment groups which just groups some instances together if you need to work with them as before, is in Notion, like similar to the clustering in Glassfish. And some high availability features are already available on the data grid level, like session replication. Some others are only available in the deployment group, like load balancer to different EJB, remote EJBs across all instances. But in general, it's supported on all layers, either with data grid or deployment group.
And as Andre very briefly mentioned, the clustering in Payara 5 has been improved when we introduced Hazelcast, in that it is now all automatic. Previously, you had to pretty much manually specify these share things, and then these separate things share things, and they couldn't necessarily talk to each other. Now, essentially, everything in the domain can share things, and then and everything clusters automatically. The deployment groups is literally just done post clustering in a sense. It's a logical grouping in that aspect of.
Yeah, I remember that it was quite confusing in Payara 4. There were two different concepts, and one of them was default, the older one, while the other one was not so evident but better because it was built on Hazelcast, and a lot of features in Payara Server were built on top of Hazelcast. And in Payara 5, everything came together, and it's much easier to use, much more natural. And Hazelcast is by default, so it's not necessary to configure all the pieces anymore. Everything works out of the box.
And it's definitely flexible.
Yeah, and we even improved.
Sorry.
We even improved usage in cloud environment and Docker with adding additional discovery mechanisms for Hazelcast, so it's no longer pain to configure Hazelcast in these scenarios. It's just a couple of checkboxes in administration console if you need to change things.
In the very latest release of Payara, we introduced a clustering mode for Kubernetes, which talks to the Kubernetes API to automatically cluster with all the different micros or servers that you might have running in Kubernetes.
Okay, I think we ran out of questions. Maybe we could find some more, but maybe next time. If you have some more questions, you can visit us or contact us on our page. There's a contact form, or you can reach us to us on the GitHub. Maybe even better is to use Payara form, where you can just send an email and get answers and directly communicate with us via emails. And we're also on social media anywhere. Maybe Jaden can tell more.
Yeah, that's it. Twitter, Facebook,
Instagram.
No, not Instagram yet. Could do.
We're basically anywhere you
Yeah.
can. So just don't hesitate too much before asking us.
I'm sure one of us has an Instagram that you could just contact us.
Yeah. But yeah, we're quite approachable on social media. We actually get back to people. Actually. So yeah, thank you very much, guys. I'm sure this will be very useful. I'm just going to stop the recording, if that's okay. Bye.